Good day, everyone, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. We're excited to have you join us. Our topic today is 2020 testing trends, top predictions for QA teams to watch, join, and lead. My name is Mitch Ashley, and I'll serve as your host and moderator. A few housekeeping items. We are recording the webinar. All participants will receive the slides and the recording for the webinar via a link that an email is going to be sent to you after the end of the webinar. We also have 3 Amazon gift cards that we're giving away today, and we will be notifying the winners of those gift cards following the end of the webinar. So let's jump right to our topic. 2020 testing trends, top predictions for QA teams to watch, join, and lead. It's my great pleasure to introduce our 2 speakers for today. First is Ryan Yackel, who is product management with Tricentis. And we have Wolfgang Platz, who's founder and chief product officer with Tricentis. Ryan, I'm going to hand the baton to you. Take it away.
Thanks, Mitch. And thanks for everyone who joined the webinar today. I'm really excited to talk about some trends for 2020, kind of what to watch out for, and also not only just watch out for, but also things you can join and lead. And obviously, I'm super excited to have our founder and CPO Wolfgang Platz on the phone today. Wolfgang, how are you doing today?
Thanks, Ryan. Everything great. Likewise, regarding the audience, super excited to have the chance to talk to a lot of people here and get going, Ryan.
Great. And this is actually our first time doing a webinar together. So I think it's going to be a great one. Obviously, you and I have done, I don't know, upwards of hundreds of webinars in the past. So very excited to do this in tandem today together. I'm going to give you a quick overview of just who Tricentis is. Just real quick for those of you who don't know, we are the continuous testing market leader, both in Agile test management and advanced test automation that's really optimized for over 160 plus technologies. And that keeps just getting bigger and bigger as we kind of invest in our customer bases that I've really grown to over 1,800 plus enterprise customers worldwide. So we're very, very, very excited to bring test automation and solve complex problems in the enterprise. And we'll be talking about some of those today, along with the 20 trends that we'll be talking. So just a real quick agenda for today. I'm going to give a quick overview of some macro trends. And then what we're going to do is really focus on top 3 trends that Wolfgang's going to focus on that we see from a Tricentis view and kind of areas we're investing in as well. And at the end, we're going to do some Q&A. So if you have Q&A, make sure you're kind of thinking about those or entering those as you go along here. And we're going to go ahead and answer those kind of towards the end. If we have a question that pops up in as well, we'll try to answer that as we go along. Real quick, kind of some market trends that we're seeing. And I'm going to, again, talk briefly about these before we do a deep dive into the top 3. But the first one is really around test automation finally gets credited for DevOps success. This is something we've been talking about for a while, which is automation in general is, and especially test automation, has been looked at as something that is pivotal for reducing release cycles and so on. However, we're really seeing it as an enabler for people to achieve true DevOps success. And we'll talk about some of the recent data we have from that. The other one is the rise of big data and data integrity testing. When we think about testing in general, a lot of times people think about kind of user experience type testing from maybe a web application or mobile application, but really the rise of data and the problems and complexity that's going on in the world will actually show you kind of what's going on with data that's going to make really the rise of making sure your team can focus on data integrity testing in 2020 a pivotal thing. And then we'll kind of really briefly touch on testing in IoT and how that's getting strategic. But all these 3 things said, we'll briefly touch on these, and then Wolfgang's going to go over 3 main core areas that we're looking at from a Tricentis side and how we see that kind of playing out in the market. Stuff around AI-powered testing coming to age. We'll be looking at how to actually shrink your test case libraries. And a big thing that's going on, which is a convergence of test automation and RPA. So let me get to the first one, which is test automation finally gets credited for DevOps success. I like to show this graph, and what's interesting about this graph is this graph, if you slice it different ways and look at different research that's out there, you'll find different slices of the pie and so on. But one thing kind of remains, which is when you look at what impedes delivery for innovation, it's actually testing. And this report actually came from this year, which is from GitLab, which is a global developer report. Which it's pretty interesting about this report is that they weren't necessarily serving or talking to testers or test managers. They were actually talking to developers. And what the developers were telling them is that, hey, we want to release really, really fast, but we also know that testing still impedes that progress for them. So we have the developers actually buying in on this and saying that testing is actually something that's impeding that delivery for DevOps success. The other thing we noticed is that when we did our own Tricentis automation research survey, which is going to be coming out later this year, a little bit teaser for you all to keep in mind, and we'll have that at tricentis.com later, is if you look at the teams that are actually not succeeding with DevOps, really there's a problem with it, is that they have test automation rates that are lower than 20%. And that's kind of standard across the board. But if you look at teams that are actually succeeding in DevOps and they say, yes, we have completed DevOps transformation, what they'll tell you is that actually we're having 50% more, 50% or plus, our test suite has been automated. So if you think about kind of what's going on and where the credit is actually lying here, is that you're actually seeing is that when you have increased levels of test automation, you're getting developers to buy into the fact that, you know, testing is having this impeding progress on their delivery. The more you're automating and the more you can increase and get more test automation coverage, not even just at the functional level, but the UI level, API level, and also unit level, you're actually gonna have more success with your DevOps transformation. So keep a watch on this. We're gonna have the more research of this coming out later this year. It kind of deep dives along all of this, these major enhancements or major resources that we have focus on test automation. So again, keep on the lookout for that. The next thing is the rise of big data and data integrity testing. And I had a question for Wolfgang, actually, is do you know what a zettabyte is, Wolfgang?
A bite of a zebra? Is that what it is?
That you know, I thought it was something that had to do with zebras at first as well. It sounds something that is not even a word, but actually a zettabyte is 1 trillion gigabytes. Which I don't even know what the zeros on 1 trillion gigabytes is, but if I were to multiply that out more and more and more, what you have is you have a zettabyte being 1 trillion gigabytes. And what you hear from IDC is that the global data is actually going to grow year over year by 61%. So if you think about how much data is in the world today, and back in 2018, it was around 33 zettabytes. It's going to go to 175 by 2025, and the majority of that, and they say this as well, which is around 60% of that data is going to be housed by the enterprise. So if you think about all the data that's constantly expanding, constantly growing, what does that mean for testing, right? We're going to need to be able to live in a world and test in a world that we're going to be the gatekeepers to make sure that this data is validated correctly across systems of record, systems of engagement, and we want to make sure that we're able to keep up with this influx of data, because it's not stopping and it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And real quick, I just want to mention a quick customer story from Aegon. And they basically had two main core systems that had some data integrity problems, which was around kind of a market analysis system and also an accounting system. And what they had to do was they said, listen, our data problem is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and we need to figure out a way to make sure that we can actually validate the data that's coming in and out, whether it's from a data lake to our database, from maybe like a Salesforce engine or Salesforce UI cloud infrastructure. It didn't really matter, right? They need to make sure that what they were doing and what the data they actually have was actually accurate, so they could make key business decisions. So instead of looking at, how can we take our data scientists, or how can we take our SQL engineers and make them, turn them into testers, they figured out a way to leverage their existing resources for this data integrity testing. What they found was they developed around 400 plus automated test cases with our solution, and that resulted in being able to verify hundreds of tables with tens of millions of records. The cost of the testing time that actually came down from 84 we're around 85 hours around to 11 hours. So if you think about what they were able to do, they're able to take their existing testing resources that were mainly focused on kind of testing, your web application front end, maybe some mobile testing, maybe some in-house applications, and really get them to be able to be really true test automation engineers at the data integrity level, and be able to cut that testing time from 85 hours to around 11 hours. So something to think about as you're in your organization is that how can you take the testing that you're doing currently right now and extend that into the data integrity testing that you may or may not be doing in your organization. The last thing is testing in IoT before I get to Wolfgang's top three trends for Tricentis in 2020, which is really you have this connected complexity for testers. Gartner kind of mentioned that there's basically going to be around 26 times more connected things than people by 2020. And this was actually kind of crazy, is that 127 things or devices are connected to the internet every second. That's pretty wild. I mean, every time you think about, as the second goes by, you have 127, whether it's a mobile device, it's a pacemaker, whatever it is, they're connected to the internet rapidly at this pace. So for testers, what that means is we're going to have to be more and more in tune with how we're going to go about testing our IoT connected devices. I was talking with somebody the other day, and they were basically saying that IoT has become very much a problem with security and also with compliance. If you think about kind of what's in a pacemaker, and they have to basically test and make sure that what things could be hacked when it comes to a pacemaker, or what things could be the battery level of that pacemaker. If you were to update it, update it at a certain time. If you have firmware to it, because that could affect the vitals of a person. Lots of things in IoT that are going to make testers more and more critical to make sure that we're keeping up with all these 127 devices that are connected every second. And it's not only just kind of in those core areas where you're thinking about with pacemakers and things like that, the healthcare that's on the line. It's also kind of infiltrating even the daily consumer. This actually came out recently. This was for Cyber Monday. This was the FBI basically telling people that if you bought a smart TV with a camera, make sure that that thing cannot be hacked. If you look at a lot of good deals that are online, well, those things may be vulnerable to security problems, and you may want to make sure that those are able to be figured out. I actually didn't buy a TV this Cyber Monday. I think I may have come to this problem if I saw, but my wife told me that I could not buy anything this Cyber Monday. So I hopefully have nobody spying on me when I get home, but that always could be the case. Okay, so as we kind of roll out here, just a quick overview of kind of what we talked about. Again, test automation is going to be critical for your DevOps success. We know that. You have data to back that up. Make sure that testing is being elevated to that level. We kind of looked at the rise of big data and security, big data testing, and the role that's going to have in 2020 as data continuously expands. And the last one is kind of testing in IoT of the multiple things that are connected. You may not be testing something that's connected with IoT today, but you will be pretty soon, just depending on how many devices are connected every second. So with that, we're going to go to the top 3 trends that we also see kind of in how Tricentis actually is impacting that. And for this, I'm actually going to pass this over to Wolfgang, so you can kind of take us away and talk about these 3 items.
Hey, thanks a lot, Ryan. Frankly, this was a webinar on its own. Very exciting data, very exciting pieces of information. Thanks for opening it up and sharing all these news with us. So as you mentioned before, I will really want to focus on top 3 trends which we see from a Tricentis perspective, and lay this out to you in some more detail. First things first. Everybody's talking about AI these days, so I'm going to talk about AI-powered testing. We're going to go a different route than a lot of others do. When it comes to artificial intelligence, we're not going to do the bullshit route. So you're going to hear about things that are real. The next thing I would like to talk to you about is test case libraries. What we actually see is that people come up with way too many test cases in general with high levels of redundancy while still struggling to get the business risk covered. And we see that there's technology, great pieces of technology out there, but also great pieces of methodology out there. And using that can be way more beneficial than even automation can be. So please take that into consideration. And last but not least, when we talk about automation, actually we're going to see automation converge, a bigger play of automation emerging, what we would call an enterprise automation play. And this is actually going to be the convergence of test automation and RPA going forward, which I also would love to talk about. So let's go into the AI-powered testing comes of age topic first. So as I mentioned, AI, when you have a look at artificial intelligence, you see that there's so much talk out there, but when you really dig deeper into companies that try to have themselves associated with AI, in a lot of cases there's not too much to it, and skepticism is really something you should have when people try to sell you on their AI capabilities. We have been taking this very, very seriously, and for Tricentis we have concluded that we're not going to talk about AI loosely and come up with areas where it can really bring value to testing, and here they are. Number one is change impact analysis. And I'm going to be happy to introduce this specific idea to you in more detail. You're going to see that today in the second point, actually, that we are focusing on, which is the optimization of test case libraries. I'm going to spend some time and share the details of how it works and where artificial intelligence comes into play here. Number two is a super, super exciting project that we have been working on, and I'm happy to introduce that to you today, which is a truly AI-based optical engine for the automation purpose. Super cool stuff. You're going to see that in a second. And last but not least, an area which I personally believe is very, very useful going forward is autonomous failure triage. All of you guys who have run into software testing and have run into test reports and then had to try to find out what is the real cause of false test cases, that fail, know about the problem. It is what we call the false positives issue, and it is super useful to know more about where the cause of the failure lies. So this is where AI will also be of great, great value. So let's focus on the middle tier here, which is AI-based optical engine first. And to do that and to explain where we are heading, let me share with you briefly what Tricentis has been delivering in the past. First of all, what you see here now rolling down is a script which is meant for test automation. It's actually a Selenium script. And this is the way traditionally people would go for an automation case. They would write script. And there's a series of issues that come with this, obviously, because with this code, you need to do a series of different things. And all in all, you need to have somebody who's capable of coding. What we have brought to the industry is a different way of thinking about it. We call it model-based automation. What model-based automation would do is it would bring the topic of automation to a business readable level. It would separate the business level from the technology underneath, and through this separation, we solve a lot of problems. One is you don't need to be a tech person to be able to productively contribute to test automation. That's one thing. The other thing is that it becomes so much easier to maintain the automation because the technology is focused just on one single position. So this has been a great advantage that we have brought to the market. What it still requires is in between the user interface, which you want to interact with, and the test cases, which are ideally formulated on a business level, you still need to have this kind of a glue in the middle, which is what we call the model. And this model would now have two flavors. One is a business flavor to express which controls you're interacting from a business perspective, and underneath it would have the technology information. So we asked ourselves, isn't there a better way to do it? Isn't there a way where you would not need to have the technical information at hand anymore? And why did we think we can deliver on that? Well, because if you interact with an application, you don't need to have this technical information at hand. By seeing the interface, by seeing the user interface, you're able to decide what is the appropriate way of steering that interface, you as a user. And we said, if there would be a chance to come up with a radically new engine, optically, technology independent, we might get as smart as a user is, a real user, in interacting with the system and don't need the technology information anymore. And the only way to do that is to work like human brains do, meaning it needs to be AI powered. And that is what we have come up with. So the first problem we had to solve here as Transcendence is what is the name? How are we going to call it? And we decided on giving it a name that a lot of people of you may now immediately know because you've seen this great movie Matrix out there. And the name of this is actually NEO, the Neural Optical Engine. And I had a chance to introduce that on our annual conference 2.5 weeks ago in Vienna. And let me tell you, the feedback that we received from both customers and partners was nothing but stunning. And let me tell you why it is so cool. Before NEO, the idea of interaction through an optical control would only have been covering simple static controls, meaning like edit boxes or labels. And it would not be suitable for dynamic controls and composites. What is a dynamic control? That's, for instance, dropped on a table. Composite is tables, trees, calendars. And what it means is here on the left side, a little example. This is a real application. What you have to do as a user, you know immediately, you need to select the year of construction, which means this is going to be very likely a drop-down element. But for a machine, this is very, very hard to depict. The machine finds it out through clicking on the element and then finding out that there is a list where you need to pick a value from. So what I mean by that is only having the dynamic context is gonna get you to the appropriate steering. If you cannot resolve what's going on the screen in real time, you will not be able to find out about the steering. And this is why the others fail. So what you really need to get to in order to resolve this challenge is you got to be as fast as the human eye. And I picked a very famous Austrian guy here, who some of you may know, and some interaction that he has with this target. You see that he's as fast as the human eye. 24 picks per second is what the human eye can do. NEO can do 40 picks per second. So we are faster than the human eye. And we are also accurate. The accuracy of what we come up with is 95+%. These two ingredients are patent pending, and this is what makes NEO so unique. So let me make it a bit more explicit. Here we have an application which is called ServiceNow. A lot of you people may know it. And I'm sharing now a very, very brief video, and I hope it comes across with the webinar nicely. What we're doing, we're interacting with this table element here. And as soon as I do stuff, you're going to see additional rows popping up, meaning the content of controls is dynamically extended by the interaction, okay? And what you're going to see now is you're going to see how NEO acts in what we call the Terminator mode, meaning you're going to see it displaying all the accuracy information, and you're going to see it displaying the different types of controls immediately as soon as they pop up. You're now going to see me acting on a screen, on a split screen, and you're going to see what Neo does. So the same screen, once with the Neo overlay and then without, and you're going to find out that there is no delay. So see what's going on here, okay? You see me typing in stuff on the very top here, and at the same time, Neo would depict not only the different controls, but also the OCR of the content. And you see the accuracy is stunning. You see the speed has absolutely no delay in the recognition, and this is what makes it so special. This is why this is a completely new way of UI automation, and the future of this happens today. So let me keep on going with this and share with where we are today. We are still making the picture complete. We have now trained more than 500,000 of different controls. We want to expand that to 5 million over the course of the next few months. We have a closed beta, and it is actually becoming a big project in our customer partner base who are delivering screens, which we then label and make this the most powerful engine out there. So I'm super excited about that. This is real artificial intelligence, ladies and gentlemen, and we will keep you posted. Next thing, test case libraries shrink. You heard me say that with no respect whether you are in progression testing or are in regression testing, make sure you do one thing. Make sure you use your resources wisely, meaning don't come up with too many test cases. What do I want to do with this picture here? See someone is running down a hill. Have you been running down a hill? If you have been doing this, you may remember sour muscles. That is what I would love to have you remember. Use your resources wisely. Don't go for tons and tons and tons of test cases if you don't need them. Make sure you have the right test cases at hand to prevent sour muscles. So what I mean by this is, today a lot of customers, they still report on numbers of test cases. They would come up with how many test cases green, how many test cases red, how many test cases they didn't run. But what does it tell you? Can you go productive with that? You cannot find out about the quality of your testing just by counting tests. So let me give you an example here, an example from car industry. Here you have the different elements of a car. What is the most important piece of a car? The answer is the engine. By far the most important piece is the engine. So if you come up with tests, make sure that the tests focus on the most important pieces. Make sure you are aware of the value of the risk that is associated with certain tests. And then you're going to find out that this is very much focusing on core functionality, and other functional areas are by far less important. And having that said, you will be able to come up with a piece of test cases that immediately can share what the contribution to risk coverage is. We have taken this on a journey for more than 10 years now, and we have come up with a phenomenal capability for test case design, giving you the opportunity to model test cases that have the maximum contribution to risk coverage. What you're going to achieve with that is you're going to achieve you're going to avoid redundancy, and you're going to get to the greatest levels of business risk coverage. That is how you need to act for progression testing, meaning testing new functionality. How about testing on the regression test area? How about making sure that you don't have to run more tests than required when it comes to your regression testing? Here, we have a new capability that we provide to the market, which is change impact analysis, and I would like to introduce that very, very briefly. So expect you have a big system at hand. Here it's an SAP system. Assume you have a large number of used objects in a system. When you would run now a traditional impact analysis, meaning finding out which objects are impacted by a certain change, you would be able to round down the test scope, which is a good thing. Here in the particular example is about 30% that you can reduce. However, we drive this significantly further. We come up with what we call the most at-risk objects, which is we find out which objects are the bare minimum to test in order to cover all the changes. And you see that that significance of reduction is in a different league. We can reduce the number of objects that need to be tested by 85% on average. This is AI powered. There is a dependency analysis in the background, and this dependency analysis would have a look at the depth of dependencies between changed objects and testable objects, and it would factor in risk also, meaning factor in production information of what is relevant from a frequency of use perspective, but also what is relevant from the potential damage of defects, and all that is aggregated into one consistent metrics. What you get out of this is a completely new dimension of efficiency. Here's a customer example. A customer in the SAP space, he had 9 production systems, 29,000 changes happening for their Q4 release, and 9,000 UFT scripts. So a lot of automation already going. What we did is we ran this changed impact analysis pointing out the most at-risk objects. And you now see what we call a tree map. This tree map will visualize which objects need to be checked as most at-risk objects. The white ones are not affected at all. The gray ones would be traditional impact analysis, and only the blue ones are the ones that remain through the most at-risk objects approach, which we have implemented. So you immediately see the relevance of this approach. What we did then is, well, we found out with a connection to our automation capability, Tricentis Tosca, to which extent the application's risk is covered by existing test cases. And usually people get a bad surprise here. Not in this picture in particular, but usually they find out, wait a minute, our test cases are not in good shape. At this specific customer, we found out that only 8% of their most at-risk objects have been covered with 9,000 UFT scripts. So what do you do then? So we built test cases that make it way more specific and have way more higher power, and then we ran it. And what we see then is a test result, also in a tree map, where you immediately find out what is the extent of risk that you're gonna get when you go in production. So this is a completely new ball game here. 85% of test effort reduction that comes from the capabilities of this most at-risk objects condense, and 3.5x release frequency, significantly fewer defects in production. I say 75% here, but we run into 0 defects in production customer examples here. So that has been what I wanted to share with you on the test case libraries. They shrink if you apply the right technologies. Test design when it is progression, change impact analysis when it is regression, and the promise is stunning. Last but not least, let me talk very briefly about the convergence of automation. And let me start with an information on RPA. Everybody talks about RPA these days. We see a lot of momentum going. We see that a UiPath, Automation Anywhere, they have crazy valuations. And actually, the way I look at it is very much in line with what we call a Gartner hype cycle. Today, I would expect we are very close to getting to this peak of inflated expectations. Why are the expectations inflated? What people realize when they go on that journey, and they have been on it for like half a year to a year, is that all of a sudden these bots break. As soon as changes are implemented in the system landscape, people need to maintain their bots, and then they are subject to bot downtime, which is a very painful experience. What I believe is that we're going to see the real value of RPA occurring when someone resolves the resilience issue, when someone resolves the maintenance issue. And the answer of that someone is here. This is us. What we do with our RPA offering is we resolve the current RPA pain points, which is that coming up with the bots is complex and time consuming. Maintaining these bots is painful and people are suffering from bot downtime. And here comes another aspect, which is the title of the item that I wanted to talk to you about, which is that people are actually going into a bigger automation play. They're going into an integrated enterprise automation strategy. They say, hey, come on, if I've come up with automation in the RPA space, why shouldn't I have this automation being for software testing also? So while we do see software test automation and robotic process automation being two different disciplines as of yet, I'm convinced that we're going to see them merge. Be 2021, I think we're going to have integrated enterprise automation being on the plate of each and every large enterprise. And there is evidence to that. It's not only what you see down here in the sources that analysts talk about it. What you see also is that already GSI partners and customers set up their teams accordingly. Meaning, whereas in the past they would have their software test automation team or the RPA team, they now build shared enterprise automation specialists, and these shared enterprise automation specialists would serve for both software testing and for RPA. And we see that supported by some numbers we gained from our customer base, which show how many people are certifying their staff that has been certified on software test automation now on RPA, because it's so close. So even though we are actually at the beginning of marketing our Tricentis RPA, we already see a great dynamic of certifications going. 1,800 today completed and another 2,500 now being in progress. So great momentum. What we have been working on is a great RPA studio, which we have brought up with a super slick and slim user interface, and which we've now expanded by a great orchestrating unit that makes sure that your bots run with scheduling, with all the needs for logging, reporting, and stuff that you need out there in order to make your RPA really productive. So why should you decide for Tricentis RPA? Make sure you have the strongest automation engine at hand. These MBA, meaning model-based automation idea and capabilities that we brought to the market on software test automation is here for RPA as well. And that means that you're going to cover 150 plus technologies. You will be able to implement bots faster, and even more important, they're going to be resilient. You're going to be able to cope with changes better. And we do support this bigger topic of the reuse of automation, the convergence of automation between test automation and robotic process automation. So to sum it up very briefly, we think it's time to have AI delivering real value to software testing. And we are the ones at the very front line with our new engine, our optical engine Neo. The future of UI automation is AI-based. There is no doubt about that. We see the convergence of automation happening, which you have heard me talk about over the course of the last few minutes, where software test automation and RPA become a bigger automation play in the future. However, before you go for that, make sure you test less. Make sure you only test the true need of what it is, with no respect its progression or regression testing. So make sure you detect the need before you do. And that's all I had, I think. Thank you.
Great, thanks, thanks Wolfgang. Appreciate that focus in those three areas. As we mentioned, we're going to do about 10 minutes or so of questions. So go ahead and start submitting in those questions. We already have some coming in. And I'm going to start off with some of the AI stuff because that seemed to be a lot of the questions are coming in on. One of the questions was just a pretty simple one, which, you know, obviously AI is all over the place and we have different terms for everything. But the question was, what's the difference between AI and ML? And I'm assuming they're talking about artificial intelligence and machine learning. What is that? What was there between that, Wolfgang, and how does that relate back to testing?
Very good question. So ML, machine learning, right? Now people talk about deep machine learning when they talk about AI. I think when you want to talk about real AI, it needs to be learning, okay? But let me make one thing clear. I personally have been um, I've been very picky about the term AI because I've seen so many people talk about it without even knowing what it is. But I've come more and more to the conclusion that as long as things are smart, as long as things are intelligent, let people have the freedom to talk about it as AI. Call it amazing innovation, call it whatever you need. Call it intelligent algorithms, whatever. So having that said, we introduce real AI, okay? This is deep machine learning. Deep machine learning is not an easy thing to do. So you've got to be sure you really want to go down that road. It is a lot of effort and it's a pretty tough path, but as we show with Neo, it can get you to areas you have never been before.
Gotcha. Another question on AI, because you mentioned at the very beginning, and you just mentioned it again. Just there's lots of fluff out there, or there's lots of, you know, discussions around people saying that they have AI. The question was, what questions should I ask someone if they claim to have an AI testing solution?
Yeah, good question. How does it learn? Ask people, how does it learn? I mean, what deep machine learning would do is you would have a very large number of input situations, which you then condense into significantly fewer output. And the transition between the input and output is resolved by a neural network, which has these backpropagation algorithms in there. And and whenever you bring additional input situations, then you want to train the system so that it gets to the desired output. If it cannot do that already, okay. So this is how the learning is achieved. And if people can make that transparent to you, how it works, then I think you're in good shape. Then it's going to be real AI. If
Okay.
not, ask yourself whether you're fine with it being just a smart algorithm, which can also be of great value to you, but they shouldn't call it artificial intelligence then, right?
Gotcha. Yep. Question around RPA. Said good stuff on RPA. Didn't know hardly anything about this, but the question came in after that, which was, do you view testers moving into RPA as a horizontal or vertical move for their careers?
Good question. Good question. Let me point back to the slide that I have in here where I said that we already see pieces of evidence for this convergence of automation happening. I think that's how we should look at it. We will see automation not just be an exclusive discipline of software testing. We're going to see, as I tried to convey, a bigger automation play emerging, meaning as an automation specialist, you will be able to serve both purposes. So I think there is going to be a distinct software testing career. There's going to be a distinct business process efficiency consulting domain. And in addition to that, you're going to have an overarching automation specialist career.
Gotcha. And I kind of like that. I mean, I think it's kind of cool that you have this convergence and being able to really go in and out of both the arenas if you got the skill set to do both of those. So that's kind of, I mean, I always look for ways where I can diversify myself in my career, and I think that's really cool. So we got about 5 minutes left. A couple more questions here. You talked a lot about risk-based testing and prioritizing testing, things like that. The question was, how would you prioritize cases, specifically in IoT, given that there's millions of different paths, a test could technically take?
Yeah, so I think the base mechanisms are always the same. Find out where the value is. Uh, find out where your most heavily used transactions are. Find out where your high risk transactions are. For these ones, you want to make sure that the coverage that you achieve is extraordinarily high. For those ones, you will have a great number of tests to be run. For others that are not as critical, not as important, you will be just constraining the number of tests to the bare minimum. And I think it really depends on the areas that you work on. I mean, for instance, if it is a business application, there's a general rule of thumb, which is like 95% overall business risk coverage is kind of fine, okay? With no respect if this is an IoT piece or it is any other software application. When it comes to life critical applications though, right? You want to make sure that you get close to as close as possible to 100%. But the mechanisms are kind of the same.
Okay. No, that's helpful. Okay, last question here. I know we have some more coming in, but we want to give people time back in their day. I know it's hard to stay on for an hour webinar, so we keep it a little bit more condensed here. What companies out there that are doing AI are you most excited to watch next year in tech? And this doesn't have to be, I think this question is more broad. It doesn't have to be specifically around testing, but if we're getting more and more companies are talking about AI, what companies out there that are truly doing AI in their business that you're kind of excited to watch and learn from next year?
So I would not want to go for specific company names here, but I would want to go for specific areas that we see. And I see areas where you use data, where you use pattern recognition for process improvements, for like the data mining areas that come with business processes from a B2B perspective, so meaning from more business customer perspective. Of course, what we're going to see is we're going to see some AI pieces that are more critical to consumers floating into that area more and more. So for instance, if you have a look at what the RPA vendors talk about, they talk about AI, which is actually coming more from consumer areas like chatbots, for instance, or the visual element that we address through Neo, or language interpretation, these things. So here, from the business to consumer side, I think we're going to see the existing momentum going on. However, on the business to business side, I think we're going to see great things happening on this process mining, on this data mining area. And I think that's going to be also very useful when it comes to new areas of efficiency in software testing. We have implemented that in an early stage with what we do on the change impact analysis.
Great. Hey, well, thanks for being able to answer some of those questions. Again, we got questions coming in that won't get to today. We'll reply back to those as we kind of wrap up and reach back out to you all that attended the webinar. Mitch, I think we're wrapped up here. I think we can start the proceedings to close.
Wonderful, wonderful. Great job, guys. Wow, Neo sounds awesome. I'm excited about that. The Terminator, and by the way, I won't make the mistake about Zettabyte. I won't, it doesn't involve zebras. Good to know. I appreciate that information. Well, I would like to thank our audience for your participation, your questions. Just a reminder that we'll be sending out an email with the link to the recording of the webinar as well as the slides. Be sure to check out devops.com for more exciting webinars. And also we'll be reaching out to notify the folks that won our gift cards. Please join me in thanking Ryan, who is product manager with Tricentis, Wolfgang, founder and chief product officer with Tricentis. Also, Wolfgang is author. He has a new book out, Enterprise Continuous Testing. So be sure to check that out. It's a great book, great read. Thanks again to our audience for spending your valuable time with us. It's been my pleasure to host this webinar for you. Have a great day and be careful out there.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.